The hidden horrors of temporary housing.
The whole bath and floor fell 2.5 inches with me inside it. Now rats have free access into the house and mice have free access into the house. I have no running water from a sink in the bathroom.
I was a ghost for about 20 years. Didn't have an address, didn't have a doctor, didn't have a phone number, didn't have a mail address. It wasn't even on the system.
As Scotland grapples with a shortage of social housing, we look at the daily struggles of those living in limbo. Rats, mould and overcrowding. These are just some of the issues facing homeless people in temporary accommodation, and a growing number of people are finding themselves in this situation. There's not enough accommodation to go round, and local authorities are currently under extreme pressure to find a solution. The problem is most acute in Edinburgh. It has the lowest proportion of social housing in Scotland and the most expensive private rental sector. Well, our reporter Kay Nicholson visited the capital to meet those desperate to find somewhere safe to live.
As you can see, we have dampness and mould right above the cupboards. It comes right down into my actual cupboards, so I can no longer store food in my cupboards. I had to throw all my food out. If I was locked up in prison, I would live more comfortably than here. I would have heating, I would have a warm bed, no damp walls, I'd be able to keep food in the house, I'd be able to eat meals that were safe. It's just a horrible situation to be in. And I just feel I'm being ignored. I feel like because they've put a roof over my head, that's it. They think that we've sorted her, now she's got a roof, she can be fine. Just forget about her.
This flat in Wester Hailes feels more like a hellhole than a home to Tracy. Her bedroom walls are soaking. Her shower doesn't work, and nearly every surface is infested with mould. Tracy was told she'd only need to stay here for a few months. She's been here for more than 4 years.
The day we moved in, the housing officer at that time came into the property and she told me to check the kitchen, and she went with me to check, and she said that previous tenants had complained about dampness and mould in the kitchen, but that the landlord had been instructed to fix it and he had said that he had. So she went in and she opened the cupboard, she looked at it and it looked great, it looked fine. Essentially all he's done is a makeover, he's painted over things, made it look like he'd fixed it, because within 6 months everything started to come back, and 6 months after that the whole house was riddled with rising damp. And although I was getting checks every 3 months by link, nobody would take note of what was going on.
Tracy has an aggressive and rare form of Crohn's disease. She's immunocompromised and claims her asthma has been made worse by living here.
The whole bath and floor fell 2.5 inches with me inside it. No water comes out the taps at all since the floors fell down on top of it. So I have no hot water at all in my bathroom. The floor has dropped quite a bit. Now rats have free access into the house and mice have free access into the house. I have no running water from a sink in the bathroom. I have to physically go to friends and neighbours' houses to get bath and a shower because I can't physically use my own bathroom. And I've had to throw away personal belongings that can't be replaced, like photographs of my kids when they were born. Their dad passed away when my youngest was 15 months old. Every photo that I have of him is gone. Every photo. I can't replace things like that.
Is that because of
the mould and dampness? Everything was ruined. So all the report cards, everything that you keep from your kids, from their life, from school, now they're all gone. I don't have anything anymore. I had to throw it all away. That broke my heart.
Tracy's family live nearby, but they can't visit. Her granddaughter has breathing problems, so it isn't safe for her.
She's only 4, this is a year, so I should really be enjoying. I don't know how long I'm going to have with her, but I'm not getting to see her at all. Especially when I know I'm on borrowed time anyway because of my illness. It's horrible.
All this is chipping away at Tracy's confidence and her mental health.
It's embarrassing having people in the house because you don't want people to come in and smell that. Nobody wants to drink a cup of tea that's been prepared in a kitchen that's covered in black mould, and that you're scared that you're going to make someone ill.
This is a private sector leasing or PSL flat. It's an arrangement where the council pays a private landlord to rent their property. The scheme is managed by housing association Link and was created to cope with the demand for temporary housing.
Apparently there's been no repairs in 16 years done to this house.
And obviously the system, the way it's set up, means that the landlord of a PSL will be getting a decent amount of rent every month.
Yes. It's not even worth £50 a month.
It's horrible to think you feel you've been completely forgotten.
Because they think, oh, you're ill, you're going to die soon anyway. And I put that to them, but you just wait for me to die, then you don't have to house me.
From single women to large families, this is a city-wide issue. This Syrian family arrived here as refugees in 2017. They now have settled status, but their living arrangements are anything but. Now a family of 7, they've been in this PSL flat for the past 2 years.
So my very big sister, the one in S2, sleeps down here on the mat. And my other sister sleeps here. She's the second oldest. And then me and my sister sleep up here. There's no room to put your legs.
They say their health is being affected by the mouldy conditions. 3 family members are now using inhalers for respiratory issues.
Has it taken its toll on you as a family?
Since I moved to this flat, I've had so many issues. I don't mind living in a small flat as long as the health is good and the system of the flat. Everything is healthy for us, but the problem in this house, there's a cut in the wall, so the water is coming to us as well. And the same in the kitchen.
The parents say they discovered a rat infestation around the time their 1-year-old son was born.
Yeah, and all the children didn't like using the kitchen because the rat here, I didn't go to the kitchen.
The family feels welcome in Edinburgh and the children are settled at school. But after a turbulent few years, they want to make the city their permanent home.
Do you feel like living in this kind of temporary accommodation is holding you back from that?
Yeah, I would like stay here and for life for my family. Here,
Since we moved here, we found very nice people, very welcoming. Even my children adapted to the community well.
They accept that there's a long list of people in a similar situation, but the uncertainty is draining.
For me, no problem, I'm waiting. But for my children and my wife, I can't.
Link told us the family of 7 have rejected 2 offers of alternative properties. They also claim no rats have been found and that the mould is being treated. As for Tracy, Link says it's offered her alternative properties to try and meet her specific circumstances. They've now moved her into a different property while repair works get underway.
When we have a crisis in Edinburgh with housing and there's thousands upon thousands of people suffering. You know what it's like to not have a home. You know, you don't have a base, you don't have any security, you don't have any warmth, and you're just aimlessly floating around all the time, and it's not a nice place to be.
When John was in his 20s, his struggle with addiction began. For a long time, he felt that he had nowhere to turn.
I was a ghost for about 20 years. Didn't have an address, didn't have a doctor's, didn't have a phone number, didn't have a mail address. It wasn't even on the system. I wanted that by choice. It was my choice. I just because I was done. I was hurt and upset. Fell through the cracks basically, and nobody noticed.
Single men are often placed in temporary accommodation such as hostels with strict curfews.
What was that like?
You get put in a room, then you're left in that room on your own. You can't speak to really anybody in the places. You tap anybody's door and you're asked to leave. And for me, sort of coming and being on the other side now, not once through the 15 to 20 years did anybody ever come in and say, how are you? How can I support you? And basically, so it's like you're forgotten about. And then when you're forgotten about, you're like, well, what's the point?
That must have been so isolating.
It's hard work. It's like you're already in a prison within yourself anyway, and then you get put in a box, a room to fend for yourself. They're so depressing, and I'm not saying this for everybody because I know we're all on a different journey and stuff, but it was really hard mentally for me to get through that, and I got to the point eventually where I just stayed on the street because I wanted to be around people.
John found community at a local church, and from there he got the help he needed to turn his life around. At his lowest point, he carried his belongings in bin bags, but 2.5 years ago he got the keys to his own flat.
It's my home. It's amazing. I have peace. Didn't have that for a long time, and that's what a home gives you. Every night I know I can put the key in that door, come in, and just like everybody else, when you go home for doing this, you go, it's nice to be home. You can sit down, you can relax. You're not worrying about getting chucked out in the morning, get your push stuff in your bags. Let's go. You need to go again.
There are more than 14,000 temporary accommodation households in Scotland. That's the highest figure on record. 9,130 of the people who live under these conditions are children.
How frustrating is that for you to see that things haven't moved on, they haven't changed?
It's just disheartening. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because I remember it. I remember going through that system, constant rejection, have nothing for you. You beat down. I treat people with a bit of dignity and a bit of respect, rather than knocking them back all the time. You go. There you go.
John is now using his experience to help others, working at homeless charity Cyrenians.
I just love working with people and helping people when they have none. Stray dog on the street gets picked up, taken to the vet, it gets homed, it gets out, it gets walked. What's wrong with a human being? How does a human being not get their needs met? They get forgotten about. There is hope. There's hope for everybody. We need to support these people when they get put into accommodation. We need to be there for them. We need to find out what they need, what needs need met. I hope this message reaches the right people, that we see change in ourselves, because we do this every day, to see change in people and support people in their lives, and we need help to do that.
So what can the Scottish Government do to help? Kay Nicholson sat down with the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Housing and Local Government, Shona Robison, to find out.
Cabinet Secretary, thank you for joining us. There are record numbers of households in temporary accommodation in Scotland. Is this a national emergency?
So first of all, temporary accommodation of course can be a vital safety net for families who have become homeless, or single people as well, and therefore we need to recognise that. But we don't want people to be in temporary accommodation for any longer than they need to be. We want to move people into settled accommodation as quickly as possible, which is of course why we have the rapid rehousing transition plans to get people moving as quickly as we can. But we do recognise that there's too many people in temporary accommodation, particularly families.
Some of the comments that our interviewees have said to us for tonight's programme is, I'd be more comfortable in prison. Stray dogs are given better treatment. What's your reaction to statements like that?
Well, of course that concerns me, and we do have standards of accommodation both for the social rented sector and for the private rented sector, and we would expect those standards to be met. So I would hope that those issues that have been raised with those particular properties will have been addressed by the landlord. And I want everyone to have a secure, warm, affordable home, and that's of course why we're investing £3.5 billion over this parliamentary term, and we need to take those short-term measures to address the living standards, to make sure that what we've set out in law around acceptable living standards and accommodation standards and housing standards are actually being met. And if they're not, then the law is there to support people to make sure that they are. And I would expect any landlord to take immediate action to address any shortfall in those standards. So we've got work to do. I absolutely accept that.
But is it simply the case that there's just not enough affordable housing as yet, and even with the budget you're talking about, that has actually been cut when you compare it to a couple of years before?
Well, the budget is £3.5 billion. It hasn't been cut. What there is a flow of that £3.5 billion over a number of years. So it won't be the same amount each year. There is an absolute need for a rapid expansion of affordable homes. Some of that will be new build through the programme. Some of that will be acquisitions from the market, perhaps from the private rented sector, and some of that will be bringing empty homes back into use. So there are short, medium and long-term solutions here.
And a lot of this does fall to councils. Are they under too much pressure to provide that support?
So we know that we need to support those working on the front line, and we're doing that. And if we need to do more, then we'll do more of that. We need to find the solutions with the local authorities. We're working very closely with them, asking them to come up with the solutions that we will want to help them to deliver, whether that's through funding and other supports, and that's what we're working on now.
Would you stay in temporary accommodation for a few days just to see for yourself how isolating it can be? You know, B&Bs, hostels, guest houses, not just the flats. There are so many different options, and many of them are very unsuitable from what we've been told.
Well, you know, through my life when I was younger, I also stayed in accommodation that perhaps, you know, wasn't the best accommodation. And so I know I want us to have a really laser sharp focus on those areas that still have too many families in temporary accommodation. And my pledge to those families is to work with them and with the local authority and other housing providers to find solutions as quickly as we can.
Thank you for joining us on Scotland Tonight.
Well, with us now is Ewan Aitken, Chief Executive of Cyrenians, and Matt Downey, Chief Executive of Crisis UK. Thank you both for joining us. So you saw that interview there, Shona Robinson saying it's up to councils to come up with solutions and then come to them and they can help with the funding. And also Scottish Government is putting in £3 billion over this parliamentary term. Is this enough?
No, it's absolutely not enough, and actually it's been cut this year. It's sophistry to say it was higher this and higher that, but over the term it's this much money. Right now, when we need it at its most, it is 16% less, and governments and councils cannot plan to build the housing they need to build if that constant flow isn't there. And the real problem is the cost of land. So it costs £78,000. They get £78,000 for a grant towards the housing. It costs £220,000 to build a two-bedroom flat in Edinburgh at present. So there are some systemic issues there that will not solve this problem with getting your budgets cut.
Matt?
Yeah, that's all correct. I suppose the other thing that we really need to address here is we have a system where people are asked to reach the worst point in their kind of housing crisis before they get the help they need. So people like Tracy and others who had to literally turn up with their suitcases before the council would help them, and then they go into temporary accommodation for months, maybe years. And instead of that, what we need is a system that's based on preventing that. And there are many things that can be done, and they're often much, much cheaper than having years in temporary accommodation. So if there's rent arrears or debt, or there's a relationship to repair, and very often we know not just that people might be homeless, but that when exactly they're going to be homeless, when they come out of the prison system or a hospital or the care system. And what we need to see is the Scottish Government being really brave to turn the system on its head and say, we'll do everything first to prevent homelessness rather than wait for misery.
That's interesting, because you were both saying beforehand, prevention, that could be the biggest weapon in trying to solve this.
We'll never solve it until we turn the tap off. So we have to be getting up further up and allowing people to ask for help from a variety of places when it's really needed. I mean, we run a mediation service because we know that family breakdown is the reason most often given when people present as homeless. But actually you can pick that stuff up in a whole variety of ways. We get referrals from schools because young people say to the teacher, I'm struggling at home because of this, and then we get a referral. And actually we have a 90% success rate in keeping families together. That's somebody that's a whole family no longer ending up homeless. And you can do that in a whole variety of ways. As Matt says, we know when people are going to leave prison, so they shouldn't be leaving prison on a Friday afternoon with a poly bag and a ticket to a town that's so far away that by the time they get there, the housing office will be shut. And despite the fact we've got standards and we're supposed to obey them, that still happens every week of the year. And that is sortable now.
So that could make a big difference. Why is this problem getting worse?
Well, because we don't have enough housing, it's getting worse. Because we have a system that's based on, reaching crisis point, it gets worse. I would also say that the welfare system is really not helping. And housing benefit is often the way in which these situations are paid for. And housing benefit's been frozen for 3 years, whilst rental costs have gone up and up and up with the cost of living crisis and inflation. So there are things the UK government needs to do next week in the budget. But we are also seeing standards in temporary accommodation being kind of normalised, which are completely unacceptable. We're helping families. There's one in particular where there's a 1-year-old child that's being hospitalised on a regular basis because of the damp and mould. That should be totally unacceptable. And we need to see councils, whatever their pressures, clamping down on that sort of accommodation.
Well, why is that allowed to happen then if there are laws saying you can't? I mean, that flat that Tracy been in hadn't been touched in 16 years.
Because unless somebody has the wherewithal to go to court, and that's folk who find their way to get to organisations like ours, and particularly Crisis, and then they can end up in court. It happens. But for so many people, it's such a demoralising experience to be in that place in the first place. And it literally grinds your soul, then actually asking for that help. And why should they have to go to court to get to that stage? We shouldn't be depending on the legal system to sort these things out. We should be starting from the premises, if I was in that situation, how would I like to be helped? And let's get it done, rather than saying, if I can get that case off my desk, then that's fine.
And why is the problem particularly bad in Edinburgh?
Well, Edinburgh faces the most acute issues because it doesn't have enough social housing and all the other things that happen, the Airbnb problem and the various strains on the stock. And also, the council's under enormous pressure. I guess, the other thing I would say, though, is that, Scotland has a proud history here. Scotland has some of the best legislation there is. It has a lower rate of homelessness than the rest of the UK. This is solvable. It's desperate on an individual level, but it's absolutely solvable, particularly if the system is redrawn to be focused on prevention.
So what about new builds and just more houses?
Yeah, we absolutely need more housing, and we need to be about the right kind of housing in the right kind of places. But not just housing, you need to build whole communities so that people...
That's huge investment.
It costs £23,000 from somebody when they present as homeless to get to a house. And if they can't keep that and they keep running around the system, that's that repeated again and again. So actually, in relative terms, it's not a huge investment because it's going to cost less than people bouncing around the system for 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, would you agree with that? It's all about trying to get lots of new housing built. In the long term, that's going to be cheaper.
Yeah, and the Scottish Government has a good plan for delivering social housing, and more of it needs to go as fast as humanly possible. And yes, we need to shift our system so that it's more about, not waiting for people to have to experience misery.
Yeah, we need to get upstream. We need to find ways of saying it's okay to say I need some help, and also encourage those where they have contact with people, particularly through the public sector, when you're engaging with folk, whether it's through schools or doctors or whatever, to ask the question, to see the signs and to ask the question. And that'll take training and take support, and folk need to know where it is they can go. But if you can get that early with somebody you trust, you're more likely to get the help that you need because you're going to go on the journey with somebody you know, rather than having to wait till the crisis, knock on the door and talk to a stranger when you're the most vulnerable you are.
Absolutely. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you both very much indeed for joining us. And that's all from Scotland Tonight. Thanks for watching. Good night.